Now all vampires seem to take their cues from Dracula, attractive, magnetic, and they look like everyone else.
Let me touch on that for a moment because this whole attractiveness thing, Ian and I have had, lots of discussions about that along with Alexander Gallant, our researcher. And one of the interesting sort of ways or themes that has changed, and it really came out with stage and screen in the 30s, was, Bram's Dracula is not the sexy guy either. He is an old man, hair on the back of his palms. He's not, like a Frankenstein with flesh hanging off, but he doesn't become super young and sexy and with sparkles around him. He only gets younger and more virile when he drinks blood, but he's still not the coolest looking guy around. He's a little more aristocratic, but as the stage and screen needed some kind of headliners, they're the ones that created, as an offshoot of what Bram created, this really kind of, European suavish looking guy with great hair and, could really charm the women. And then, of course, you have what has been evolved in today. You got teenagers with sparkles and love interests. You've got guys in True Blood that are, in some cases, these really sexually driven machines, but they've evolved to some of them having, real moral consciousness and certain struggles. So I'll just get back to, without getting off track, Bram kind of started it, and it sort of moved on from there. And one of our struggles that he and I tried was, what's our guy going to be like? It needs to be more like Bram created because we're the sequel. How do we revert back a little bit, but still merging some of those newer, attractive qualities that we're getting used to now?
Even Bela, it was more of a creation of Bela Lugosi, the suaveness. Even the dinner jacket. The costume for the gentleman who was playing Dracula before Bela didn't fit Bela. So he came to America with his tux and a couple of changes of clothes, but he had one evening attire with a cape and a top hat. And that's what he wore on stage, and it changed everything. No one knew he was a vampire, which was all these hints. I never drink wine. He really made Dracula even less of a monster than it was portrayed before. It became a cultural phenomenon because this was the first time anyone had ever seen anything like that. Today it's pretty common that the villains walk amongst us, but back then it was new.
What are the most exciting elements that you see in the afterlife of Dracula's cultural influence?
Well, for one thing, almost every major villain you see in movies today, from Hans Gruber in Die Hard to any one of the Bond villains, there are all these megalomaniacal,
Vaguely Slavic?
vaguely Slav. The Brits have been complaining for years that every time they're in a movie, they're a villain. Why is that? Well, that goes back to Dracula. What the modern structure of the villain is, each villain has a certain skill set that you could mark out, just like Bram did with Dracula. Here's the skill set. The hero is unequipped to deal with that skill set and has to find a way to overcome it and win. That's James Bond in every movie. That's, John McClane. That's Lethal Weapon. That's everything. Even, Gary Busey in Lethal Weapon, this unstoppable killer that Mel Gibson can't possibly beat, and somehow he does.
Yeah, let me touch on that for a moment. First of all, here's an irony about his influence, is that Dracula, the character that Bram Stoker created, is far more famous than Bram Stoker who created him. And that's one of those things that, you sort of laugh about and say, well, he created this guy in 1897, and unfortunately Bram died before Bram knew any of the notoriety his character, his book would create. So here's this guy that any corner of the world you go to, you go, blah, 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 and you make that face and you put your hands up, people know what a vampire is.
Dracula will always be, or the vampire will always be part of our culture because he represents an escape from what we fear. At one sense we are frightened of them, and at the other sense we want to be them. Dracula can do whatever he wants. He can have any woman he wants.
And what we like, if we embrace it or not, but we're enthused or we're intrigued with the whole idea of immortality.
He gets to do all the things that we dream of doing and can't. So there's a tremendous allure to that kind of character.